Welcome. I had a request to do a few more demonstrations on drug dosage calculations, which come up in lesson 6.2. And while there's a fair bit of variety in how they can ask these questions, they pretty well all come back to the common idea that you need to know how strong a medicine is before you administer it. And they will tell you that by giving a value such as international units per milliliter, which tells you how much of a drug is in a certain amount of liquid that you're going to administer to a person. So this is an example of an actual label for a medicine, heparin sodium for injection, and prominently displayed on the label. There's a lot of other information about storage and ingredients that doesn't interest us right now, but this is critical to what we're going to do. They tell us there are 5,000 units, as in international units, per milliliter, which when you see per milliliter, you should think per 1 milliliter. Invariably, that is what that will mean. They're saying that there are 5,000 units of heparin in a single milliliter of whatever this liquid is. It's for injection, so you would suck it up through a needle and then inject it, and it would be an intramuscular injection according to what they're saying here. So that's what's on the bottle. And the order from the physician says administer heparin sodium 18,000 units intramuscular stat, meaning immediately. So you remember how we learned to set up proportions. We can say if there are 5,000 units in a single milliliter and we've been asked to administer 18,000 units, then how many milliliters must we give? The natural way to solve this, I think, is cross multiplication. It's certainly the fastest, where you multiply the two numbers that are diagonal to each other and divide by the third one. 1 times 18,000 is 18,000. 18,000 divided by 5,000 tells us that X is 3.6 milliliters, and that is the amount that you must inject for this single dose. There is only one dose here. Stat means do this once, do it right now. So in this case, we don't have to worry about doing this repeatedly throughout the day or anything. That'll come up in some of the future examples. Now, you're given 5,000 units per milliliter, and I wrote it with the units on top and the milliliters underneath because that's the order in which they were given. There is no reason you couldn't write this fraction upside down, so to speak. You could say if a single milliliter contains 5,000 units, then how many milliliters must I give to deliver 18,000 units? Now, if you do that, the solution is still going to be 1 times 18,000 divided by 5,000. Your result will still be 3.6. So you cannot get these fractions wrong by putting them upside down. The solution will work either way. What is essential is that you have your units lined up. Here I have units in both values on top. Both of these underneath are milliliters. So you either have units on top, milliliters underneath, or here I had milliliters on top, units underneath. Either of those is okay, but don't mix them up. You should always have same units in line with each other. So in the exercises, they give us the same information. Let's see if we can do this a few more times. Drug B is available in a 5 milliliter vial. This is not so important. I don't really care how much is in the container, but this is the strength, and this is the one that we really need. 2,500 units in 1 milliliter. But our patient doesn't need 2,500 units. They only need 500. So our question is this. If there's 2,500 units in 1 milliliter, then to give 500 units, I need how many milliliters? You remember how we solve these cross-multiplying? Let's get another color in here. You multiply the two numbers on the diagonal, so 1 times 500 divided by 2,500, and that tells you that x is only 0.2 milliliters. That's the amount you'd have to administer. They don't say if this is injection or give by mouth, so no need to worry about it in this question. We have to give 0.2 mils for this. The 5 milliliters never came up. That just means that one vial is going to be easily enough to do this. We'll only use 0.2 of it, and the rest will be either reused or disposed of, depending on the medication. If they change the dosage, in this next one, they say, now instead of 500, we must give our patient 1,000. Always start with the strength. The strength is given in the problem. It says it's 2,500 units in a single milliliter. But now, we're supposed to be giving 1,000 units. And the question is, how many milliliters does that require? 1 times 1,000 divided by 2,500 tells us now x is 0.4 milliliters. That's the amount to administer. 7,500, same thing again. I'll do this one upside down just to prove that it can work. They say 2,500 units per milliliter. Instead of units on top, I'm going to say this. 1 milliliter contains 2,500 units. How many milliliters? That's the amount that they asked for. Do we need to get 7,500 units? 1 times 7,500 divided by 2,500 tells us that x is 3 milliliters now. If we'd done this the normal way, we would have had 2,500 units in a single milliliter. We're getting 7,500 units in x milliliters. You can run that and confirm that it also gives you x equals 3. So either way will work. We almost always will put units on top because that's the way that medicines are normally labeled. So this is the more usual way, and it's probably what you'll see most of your colleagues doing. Just know that if you ever see the calculation done this way, where it looks like it's upside down, it's fine. The result is going to come out anyway. Let's see what we get down here. Heparin is available in a 10 milliliter vial. Again, they give us the size of the container, which is not going to be relevant unless we're giving a really large dose. Here is the good stuff. The heparin is prepared 10,000 units per milliliter. 10,000 units. When they say per milliliter, they mean in a single milliliter. We're only giving 500. So 500 units in x milliliters. So 10,000 is to 1 as 500 is to what? If we cross multiply this, 1 times 500 is 500, divided by 10,000 gives 0.05 milliliters. 1,000 units. If we're giving 1,000 units now, same setup. You'll notice after you've done a few of these, there's not a huge amount of variety in how we can ask the dosage part. You have to start with the strength of the medication, and then you say, okay, this is what's on the bottle, but the 1,000 units is what the physicians asked me to give. They want us to get 1,000 units into the patient. Very well. How many milliliters does that mean? I'll put x milliliters. 1 times 1,000 divided by 10,000. Now we're giving 0.1 milliliters. 5,000 units. Start with the strength. The label for our heparin says 10,000 units per milliliter. we're supposed to get 5,000 units into our patient. How many milliliters does that require? Remember, always units line up with units, milliliters line up with milliliters. You can get in trouble very rapidly if you don't have your units lined up. 1 times 5,000 divided by 10,000 gives us, we're now administering 0.5 mils. Question 3. Not very different from the previous one, but let's get through it. They tell us the size of the container, which again is mildly interesting, but the part we truly need is the strength. 300,000 units per milliliter. 300,000 units, international units if you like, in a single milliliter of this stuff. And the patient is to be given 750,000 units. And we are asked how many milliliters would that call for? 1 times 750,000 divided by 300,000 tells us that X is 2.5 mils. Just quickly checking, the container is 15 milliliters. We're using not even 3, so it's easily enough that we could do this in one vial. If you were giving a large dose, you'd probably take note of the size of the container. You might imagine if this came out to 20 milliliters, you might go, whoops, one vial isn't going to do it. I better grab a second one. But in this case, we're easily under the amount in a single vial, so we're good to carry on. 600,000 units for the next one. The strength, I'm sorry. Ignore what I just did. The strength is 300,000. I was looking at the 600,000 and wrote it by mistake, but the strength is 300,000 units per 1 milliliter. But we don't want to give 300,000. We want to give, in this case, 600,000 units, which will require how many milliliters? So multiply the numbers on the diagonal. 1 times 600,000 is 600,000. Divide by 300,000, and you get X equals 2 milliliters. It's a very good habit to put your units on these values when you get them, and to put your units even if you're calculating the X down here.